You know, if there's one thing that I don't hear a lot of people talk about when looking back at the 7th generation of consoles, it's that this generation had a trend of game companies re-releasing their games of yesteryear on digital storefronts for about $5 a pop. The 360's Xbox Live Arcade supported this, as you had your Konami arcade games by Digital Eclipse, the Sega Vintage Collection. Even Atari at the time was re-releasing and remaking some of their old arcade games on Xbox Live. You also have Sony re-releasing PS1 games on their PlayStation Store for the PSP and PS3.
Namco, it's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
And then you have Nintendo's Virtual Console for the Nintendo Wii, a chance to officially buy and play the games that were on Nintendo's previous consoles digitally. Ever since the advent of Virtual Console, it's been a tradition for every Nintendo console following the Wii to have a way to play games that were released on older consoles. After the Wii U became Nintendo's most successful video game system of all time, a new generation of Nintendo arose with the Nintendo Switch, and a new generation comes with a new online infrastructure. Again, that being Nintendo Switch Online. Now, there are a lot of things to be said about NSO as a whole, like whether it's a good online subscription or not, but this video is not here to talk about that. This video is going to be specifically talking about the old school games that NSO offers, which is just recently being called Nintendo Classics. I might interchange between Switch Online and Nintendo Classics in terms of naming, bear with me. In this video, I'm going to review each system as a whole based on variety, how many titles are represented, features, emulation quality, you get the idea. Now, there are two important things that I need to mention. Firstly is that as of the making of this video, the latest Nintendo Classics games they added is so this video is going to be outdated pretty quick since they update Nintendo Classics every month, but I don't care, I'm passionate about making this, leave me. And one more thing, I'm going to go by order on when each system was added on NSO instead of when they were actually released, so Game Boy after Nintendo 64. Now without further ado, let's start with the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES if you're normal, the Famicom if you're, or you may pronounce this acronym as the NES if you're. Now if these names ring any bells, then you probably grew up with these bootleg puppies right here. Either way, if you grew up in the 80s and early 90s, or if you just have a pretty decent knowledge on video games as a whole, then there are high chances that you recognize this console and some of the games it offers. It has almost been 7 years since the NES was added on Nintendo Switch Online, so how does it stack up today? Well, the NES as of the making of this video has 81 games added to the subscription service, going by the selection of games we have in the Western version of NSO, and not including the bonus games. Now, I want to start this off by talking about the black box games. These were the games that Nintendo either made or published that were released early in the system's lifespan in North America. Pretty much every NES black box game is playable in this collection, except for certain games. Gyromite and Stack Up are not in this collection, which is kind of obvious why. Well, with Rob the Robot being needed to even play these games on the original NES. Okay, well, technically you don't need Rob per se, as he is a simple Rube Goldberg machine that presses the second controller's buttons, but at that point, the magic will be gone, man. 10-Yard Fight and Kung Fu aren't on the collection, and this is most likely because Nintendo don't actually own those games. These two NES games were originally arcade games made by IRAM. Nintendo just had the license and permission to make NES ports of those games. Now, there's a group of games that I never understand why Nintendo are allergic to, and that's the NES Zapper games. No Gumshoe, no Wild Gunman, not even Duck Hunt. Out of all the NES games that have an accessory attached to it, these games are the easiest to emulate. Hell, Duck Hunt is the most guilty of the trio because it was on the Wii U Virtual Console. How the Virtual Console release of the game handled the Zapper controls was that you used the pointer of the Wii Remote, and that's basically it. You can do this exact same thing with the Switch's Joy-Con gyroscope, and the 3D All-Stars release of Galaxy does this. You also have another thing you can do, and that's the Switch 2's mouse controls, and that's how emulators on computers emulated the Zapper games anyway. Come on, did you guys just add Duck Hunt on the Wii U just to promote Duck Hunt being added in Smash 4 and nothing else? But outside of that, nearly every first-party NES game throughout the system's lifespan is on here. You have some goodies here and there that were originally only released in Japan, like Twinbee and Joy Mech Fight. You know, the game that features this pink robot dude that became an assist trophy in Smash Ultimate. That also reminds me of this weird organ plushie I found out on some old Danger Dolan video. That was weirdly specific. I don't even know why I mentioned that. Anyways, this game is pretty cool. A few years later, as the NES app was building up, Microsoft was on board and added some games made by Rare across other Nintendo systems on NSO. So you got some crumbs from them on the NES, like RC Pro-Am for example. Thank you, Microsoft. I'm sure you treat Rare like the kings they were back then. You even have some rather obscure games on the app, like The Immortal and Nightshade. These games were made by EA and Beam Software respectively. However, the company that actually re-released those games was Pico Interactive, which is a company that pretty much acquires IPs that the original companies no longer have the rights to, and make reproduction cartridges or re-release them on digital storefronts like Steam. Now, after saying all of this stuff, you're probably thinking that there's some pretty amazing third-party input on the NES app. Well, okay, so here's the thing. You aren't going to get any Mega Man, Castlevania, or Contra games on this app, and that's a big stinger right there, as they are probably the most well-known third-party NES games, and those games were on Virtual Console. Now, I'm not sure if this has already been confirmed or debunked, but I have a theory that the main reason why these series in particular are not represented is because Konami and Capcom want consumers to buy their own collections of these games that are already on the Switch so that they can maximize profits. This theory is going to have more legitimacy once we tackle the Game Boy, so hold on to that. But the point is that I feel like this created a blemish on this app. We could have gotten so much more, and it shows. As for the Wii U NES Virtual Console, it took it 4 years to reach 94 games in North America, while for the NES Nintendo Classics, it took it 7 years to reach
81.
Now, a big factor to consider this is that the release schedule is different compared to VC, but still. Overall, I think as of right now, the NES app on NSO is pretty good in terms of playing games made by Nintendo on there, but I can think of plenty of games that deserve to get the spotlight on the app that shouldn't be an issue. On the bright side though, they did recently focus a little on this next console, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Let's call it the SNES for now. The SNES almost has the same number of games as the NES. Good old number
78.
Wait, what? Okay, sorry about that. It has
77
games due to a certain game being delisted, and that's Super Soccer. Okay, now, I don't give two donkey nuts about Super Soccer, but this is kind of concerning. Our first game taken off of the Nintendo Classics. It's kind of like a killing game. Ooh, which video game is going to get executed next? Ooh! Yeah, the SNES app is similar in many ways to the NES app in terms of the content that it provides in a nutshell. You get almost every first-party Nintendo game. Konami and Capcom hates you, you get the picture. You get some games that weren't released in North America originally, like Puyo Puyo 2, Panel de Pon, and Cosmo Game the Puzzle. Okay, but why Cosmo Game the Puzzle? Why not Pack Attack, the version we got in the West? It's not like Namco made a collection that featured Pack Attack. I stand corrected. Though, I can understand why we got Panel de Pon instead of Tetris Attack, because Tetris is owned by the one and only Tetris company, you see? But, wait a minute, didn't Nintendo later on added Tetris to the NES and Game Boy app? Ugh, I don't understand the logic in this. Shouldn't we have Tetris Attack by now? Now everybody can speak Japanese, Nintendo. Okay, no, it's fine. I am perfectly, certainly fine. I'm calm now. Let's talk about the recent updates. So there are 3 new things that Nintendo recently added specifically for the SNES app. For one, they changed the CRT filter to be more accurate to actual CRT TVs. Now all they need to do is add that to the other systems. They also added settings to remap the buttons, which honestly I never had a problem with in the first place, as the SNES controller fitted perfectly with the Joy-Cons, but hey, it's more accessibility, which is always good. And finally, we have our first Nintendo Classics game that has mouse support, and it's Mario Paint, the first time that Nintendo ever re-released this game, which is pretty neat. Look, I just drew Mugo on Mario Paint with my very own Nintendo Switch 2 Joy-Con. Aren't you guys proud of me? Not only that, but Switch 1 users aren't left out. You can plug your own computer mouse's USB onto the Switch's docking station and use it on Mario Paint. And if you have a Switch Lite, then well, you're shit out of luck. Mario Paint's existence on NSO gives me some hope that Nintendo will come out with more games that use their accessories. So hey, maybe the light gun games still have a chance. Some criticisms to be made before we move on to the next console. There isn't that many RPGs on the SNES app. I think this is worth noting because the Super Nintendo was kind of an RPG machine thanks to Square and Enix, but I guess that didn't happen because, yeah, you get the picture. Hell, there wasn't really that much Square Enix games on Virtual Console as far as I'm aware. Oh well, it looks like we have to settle for Breath of Fire and Earthbound for now. Also, maybe I'm just a classic Konami fan, but I find it weird how the only SNES game from Konami that we got is Poppin' Twinbee. At least the NES had 2 from Konami, but we decreased to 1, and I'm thinking of games that I know they won't re-release anytime soon. Well, we already have Poppin', so how about we add its sequel, Rainbow Bell Adventures? But overall, the SNES on NSO is pretty good after getting updates for 6 years. As a matter of fact, I think it's slightly better than the NES app. More so the fact that the SNES collection has more fleshed out games than what the NES got, with RPGs in the mix, more co-op games, and more adventure games. A lot of the games that we got on the NES app were more on the arcadey side, which can be fun as time wasters in this day and age. The app even has Mario Paint, which is pretty cool. I still think that there's even more games to add, but this feels satisfactory, and I invested in this app more than the NES one. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention, Jalco games suck! Okay, so now we're going to be tackling expansion pass territory here. So let's take a break from Nintendo and switch to Nintendo's main competitor 16-bit machine, the Sega Genesis, also known as the Sega Mega Drive outside of North America. This is our first third-party system on NSO, and currently there are 50 games on the Sega Genesis app, a little bit less than the NES and SNES app, but I guess it's somewhat justifiable since this didn't come to the subscription service until 2021. I kind of have a bone to pick with the selection of games we have, but we'll get to that a little later, because there's some pretty unique things about the Sega Genesis app compared to other apps on NSO. For one, the Korean ROMs of the adventure games that Sega published at the time are available here. I know that sounds kind of simple at first, but I just kind of find it interesting that the Korean versions of these games are recognized by Sega. South Korea has a pretty fascinating history when it comes with video games, but that's a whole other can of worms. Another thing that I have to mention in terms of controls is that there isn't even the slightest bit of input delay. Oh my god. This is actually kind of a revelation. I'm impressed by this. I guess Genesis really does what Nintendo don't, huh? Okay, so I kind of forgot to mention this, but all of the systems except the Genesis on NSO have really slight button delay. It's not that bad to the point where it is noticeable and unplayable, but it's there if you really tap the button quick. I'm assuming that the reason why these games' button inputs are near perfect compared to the other apps is because the Sega Genesis emulation is handled by a different team, that being M2. You might know them for a lot of video game collection emulation projects. Hey, that kind of rhymed there. Collection emulation, collection emulation, collection emulation. We're living in a simulation, we're living in a simulation! M2 are professionals when it comes to this stuff. If only they handled the Sega Genesis classics on Switch, because holy shit, the input delay is bad on that collection. So the collection of games we got is pretty, interesting. I like that we can play Sega's action-adventure games like Sinti, Oasis, and Landstalker. And we got some pretty interesting third-party stuff like Earthworm Jim, Street Fighter 2, and Mega Man The Wily Wars. Aha! So there's Mega Man 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm over here wondering this. Where the hell is Sonic 1? No, seriously, Sonic the Hedgehog isn't on this app. I mean, we got Sonic 2, and yeah, I guess I can understand no Sonic 3 because of them trying to sort the copyright with Who's Bad? But no Sonic 1? That's like if we have no Super Mario Bros. On the NES app. Imagine that. Yeah, I'm gonna be blunt with you. The Sega Genesis app is kind of lacking if you pay attention to the first party games. No Bonanza Bros, no Alex Kidd, no Columns 3, no Sonic 3D Blast. Where are the other games, guys? Y'all had them in the botched Sega Genesis classics. You personally know me and own me, Nintendo and Sega. You don't want to see me when I'm mad. Okay, no, let's not do that. I'm just embarrassing myself. The Sega Genesis on NSO needs some work on the games, man. And not only that, but it has been a while since the app has been updated as well. Honestly, with the best feeling controls and the addition of third-party games, this collection has the potential of being a great option to play Sega Genesis games officially. I just wanted to completely curb stomp Sega Genesis classics because that collection sucks, man. Don't play it. Oh, it got delisted? Woohoo? Oh, okay, now I just feel awkward. Let's jump to the third dimension into the Nintendo 64, another system added to the expansion pass, with
42
games released in the Western version of the app. So compared to other Nintendo Classics apps, this one has a pretty weird journey throughout the years with its updates outside of the games. So grab a snack and let me explain. This one's a doozy. You see, when the N64 NSO app was first released in October 25th, 2021, it was kind of a mess. There were plenty of games that had graphical glitches, like Ocarina of Time with the bad fog rendering and no water reflection in the Shadow Link fight, and also Paper Mario having a chance of deleting your save file, among other things. Nintendo would eventually fix these emulation problems as the app got updated over time. Modern Vintage Gamer made multiple videos about the state of the N64 app when it was fairly new at the time. I recommend checking those videos out if you want more details about how the emulation quality evolved over time. Personally for me, a weird thing that I've noticed when testing some of the games is that Mario Tennis doesn't fit the whole screen resolution. Is the game actually programmed to be like this or not? I can't tell. Outside of emulation, another oddity about this app compared to the others is that as Nintendo added more games, they decided to make a separate app for games that are given a mature rating. Probably to not anger the ESRB for updating a teen-rated app with more mature titles. What's funny about this is that Japan actually got a similar app a bit earlier for Zero Z rating. And what was the game that started it all in Japan? Jet Force Gemini. Wait, what? Yeah, a game that's rated T for teen in America got the 18+ rating in Japan. That is crazy. You know, I think I've heard that Japan's game age rating system is actually quite strict when it comes with body dismemberment, which is why JFG was rated as such. Honestly, this could be a topic for another video, but anyways, let's talk about the controls. The N64's controller is, let's say it was unique for its time. And even more unique now. While the previous consoles fitted pretty well for the Nintendo Switch's button layout, the N64 you actually had to make an effort in order to make it feel comfortable for you. Thankfully, in a fairly recent update for the N64 shortly after the Switch 2's launch, you can actually configure the controls straight from the menu as you're playing your game. You see, before that update, you had to go to your actual Switch's controller settings and make a whole controller profile that changes the buttons for everything. You know, that update also added something for the Switch 2 only that the N64 app didn't have at all during the Switch 1 days. That was rewinding and a CRT filter. Yeah, believe it or not, those features will have been too much of an ask if you're trying to run the N64 emulator at full speed for the Switch 1 specs. So they decided to add it for the Switch 2 only. Huh. Looks like that 12GB of RAM was put into use here. Okay, that's enough talking about the app's quality improvements over the years. So is the game collection here good? Well, I have to say, this is actually the console that has more games than its Wii and Wii U Virtual Console counterparts, with both of them only getting 21 N64 games in North America. We have most first-party games on here, but the most notable one that's missing in my opinion is Donkey Kong 64, which is weird because after the release of Bonanza, you would think that they would have added it by now, but nope. Smash 64 is another notable first-party title that isn't here, but apparently it's been leaked from one of the trailers, so hey, there's a chance. Please don't make us wait for too long for a Nintendo, please. Some of the games here are probably the most wacky picks out of all of the consoles represented on NSO. They added some obscure game that nobody knows called GoldenEye 007. Yeah, nobody talks about that game. But everybody knows Iggy's Wrecking Ball. You know, even though this is the first time many third-party N64 games are being re-released, I still feel like they can add even more with, I don't know, Mystical Ninja, Mega Man 64, and Resident Evil 2 for example. And you know, I was gonna say Mischief Makers, but I don't know, Square Enix probably forgot that they even owned that game after the merger, so maybe not, unfortunately. But hey, the Switch 2 has a built-in microphone, so does that mean mean, no. The world isn't ready for peak yet. Overall, the N64 app is probably the most crazy one of the apps, which says a lot about the original console itself. It had a wild ride over the years, and despite only having
42
games, that number sounds pretty accurate because Nintendo didn't really support the N64's library that much compared to their previous consoles, if I'm not mistaken. But enough about home consoles, it's time to go portable. The Game Boy and Game Boy Color. Okay, so I know that Nintendo considers the Color just a variant of the Game Boy, but it feels like a successor to it. I mean, it has its own extensive library of games, but oh well. This app has
41
games released in the West. I expected more, to be honest. Okay. So what I find pretty cool about the NSO Game Boy is that not only you can replicate the original dot matrix screen, but you can also choose which color palette from each Game Boy model. Do you want the original green, the black and white Game Boy Pocket, or the Game Boy Color? Come on kid, take your pick, I ain't got all day. Okay, so let's talk about the game library a little bit. We have all of the Zelda Game Boy games, which is pretty neat. You surprisingly have Kirby's Tilt and Tumble, one of the few Game Boy games that have a gyro sensor inside of its cartridge, which is simulated using any Switch controller's gyroscope. But do not play this game with separate Joy-Cons, oh my god! You have all of the Mega Man Game Boy games. Well, not stream. And yeah, see, this proves my point. Capcom was fine putting these games here because they know they wouldn't make a Mega Man Game Boy collection anytime soon. Okay, I'm done being Mr. Nice Guy. It's time to rant now. This collection sucks! Why are so many first-party titles missing? I mean, Waterland 3, that's nice. Where's Waterland 1 and 2? You don't start with 3, that's not how numbers work. Oh wait, the first Waterland is called Super Mario Land 3. But that doesn't count, that's a subtitle. Game & Watch 3, neat, but where's 1 and 2? Why is Nintendo acting like the opposite of Valve? Valve can't count to 3 while Nintendo starts with 3. What the shit is going on? Hey, Kirby Star Stacker, that's cool. We got a Kirby spin-off, but no Black Ball or Pinball Land? The Kirby game that's now known for that totally innocent 4chan story? Hey man, if you know, you know. No Super Mario Bros. Deluxe? No Mo Mania? You know, Pokemon the trading card game is a pretty sweet game. I wish Pokemon was like a, you know, like an RPG where you can, I don't know, catch monsters and do battle with other monsters. But, that'll never happen, I guess. Yeah, I got nothing else to say about Game Boy on NSO, man. It's pathetic. I know that Game Boy on NSO came out like 2 years ago, but I feel like there's no excuse for this. We should have about the same amount of games as the NES and Super Nintendo apps. I mean, the Game Boy is like one of the most easiest machines to emulate, even with much older hardware. It should have at least more than what the N64 had, not about the same amount. What a barren selection of games to choose from. Let's get out of this disappointing mess. I said disappointing. I said this 2 times. Well, whatever. I don't care. It goes in the final cut. That shows how much I care about Game Boy on Switch Online. The Game Boy Advance was added to the Switch Online expansion pass the same time the Game Boy was added for basic tier users. Okay, so I guess I was a little bit rage blinded in that last segment, to the point where I forgot to mention the most hyped feature about these 2 apps. And that's multiplayer link cable games. For the first time ever in official Nintendo emulation history, you can play multiplayer Game Boy games with a friend online or locally with multiple Switches. I really like this feature because I was somewhat disappointed that Nintendo didn't include multiplayer functionality when the Game Boy Advance was on Wii U Virtual Console, or when Game Boy was on the 3DS Virtual Console. Not only that, but you can share your screen with other players. Looks like Nintendo was experimenting with game share before the Switch 2's release. There's plenty of fun to be had in multiplayer, especially with the Game Boy Advance games available, with Mario Kart Super Circuit and Four Swords being in the mix. Speaking of games, let's talk about what the GBA offers. The GBA has 27 games available to play in the West. Yeah, that's a pretty short number. But hey, the first party representation is mostly good. We managed to get the Starfy games released here for the first time, but they're still in Japanese. fans, you know what to do. And I can't help but notice that we're still missing Nightmare and Dreamland, the Mario Sports titles, and Advance Wars. Yeah, come on guys, we have Fire Emblem, why no Advance Wars 1 and 2? But the biggest problem that I've noticed is that there's barely any third-party games in here. And what's crazy is that there weren't any third-party games at all until they announced these two sons of bitches while I was making the script. And I can't find a good excuse why we still have yet to see these games from other companies because they were on the Wii U Virtual Console. Like the GBA had a massive library of third-party games. We could use some Konami stuff, some Sega stuff, and even some Rare stuff. They actually supported the GBA pretty well even after the Microsoft buyout. You know, this feels like a big cock tease because I remember data miners discovered that a lot of these games were tested for the GBA emulator. Damn, we got blue-balled hard, man. But overall, despite the GBA app having less games than the Game Boy app, I honestly would take the GBA collection any day over the Game Boy one. And that's simply because Game Boy Advance games are way more fleshed out than Game Boy games. You might as well even say that they're more advanced. See what I did there. Yeah, anyways, just add more third-party games. And now for the grand finale. The Nintendo Gamecube, the most recent system added to the Switch Online expansion pass, and the only one that's available exclusively for the Nintendo Switch 2. So how many games are on here as of now? Okay, there's no need to be dramatic, it just came out, jeez. Okay, so this will be extremely brief, but I'm glad that GameCube games are finally on Switch Online, because the console has my absolute favorite games from Nintendo on here. Just think about the games that they could add. Double Dash, Mario Power Tennis, all of the Mario Party games, especially with 6 mic support, they can actually do that. Kirby Air Ride to promote Kirby Air Riders. Dude, we got Soul Calibur 2 day 1, and that gives me hope that we might see some other third-party games here as well. There's a lot of demand for GameCube games to be re-released. I mean, look at these eBay and Amazon prices. Sweet mother of God. Overall, there isn't really too much to be said about the GameCube's representation on Switch Online. It's still pretty young, and the only thing that I can say is it has a lot of potential, and hopefully it has a bright future of good updates to it. Damn, that was like what? That was only like what, 3 short paragraphs or something? And that was all of the Nintendo Classic Systems reviewed as of the making of this video. There were some highs and some lows, but overall, I believe that all of the systems here have improved a lot as the years went by via updates. Except for Game Boy, because screw Game Boy. Despite me saying that though, I feel like Nintendo shouldn't just focus on games on the Nintendo Classics. How about some stuff like turning off the borders? Or hell, customizable borders. How about we have some digital manuals? How about we have some online sessions with strangers instead of just being restricted to friends? Another thing I hear people say that they want from Nintendo Classics is the option to outright buy the games without having to be locked by the subscription. And yeah, I kinda agree to this. Personally for me, I mostly couldn't beat a game before a subscription expires. Looking at you, Xbox Game Pass. So I have to keep paying to renew it so I can play that certain game more. At this point, I'd rather just outright buy the game and I'll be cool for the rest of my life. I wanted to take a deep dive into the Switch's Nintendo Classics because I have a really great passion for video games, especially older titles, and I think it's pretty neat that people get to pick up and play these games on the palm of their hand. But of course, you can play more of these games via other means if you know what I'm saying. So here's hoping the Nintendo Classics become better than ever and Nintendo actually listens to their fans. Hey, who knows? Maybe we might see Nintendo DS games soon. Okay, so, yeah. Nintendo decided to announce something very funny at the last minute as I'm making this script. But in their September Direct, they announced a new system to be added in Nintendo Classics. And, all I can say is... Ah! So this video is going to be outdated pretty quick since they updated. I meant to say update. You have some goodies here and there that were. Thank you, Microsoft. I'm sure you treat Rare like the kings they are, but kings they are. They're not kings. They were kings. Thank you, Microsoft. I'm sure you treat. However, the company that really re-released those games was Peak. Okay, that's their name, Peak. Now, after saying all of this stuff, you're probably. Hey, Kirby's. Why am I struggling with this name? The GBA has 27 games available to play in the West. Yeah, that's a pretty short number. But hey, okay, I just stuttered there. Kirby Air Ride to support, well, not support, promote the upcoming sequel. Kirby Air Ride to support the. Why do I keep saying support? About some stuff like turning off the borders, or hell, customizable borders. There were some highs and some lows, but overall, I believe that all of the systems here have improved a lot as the weirs. Did I just say weirs?